Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Dev Diary. Today we're back to work on our Plants vs. Zombies Cross Vampire Survivors mashup. In the previous episode, we refined the level up system by adding level up rewards and descriptions for those rewards to our game. This also included our first evolution for the Kernel Pult, which would evolve into the Cob Cannon after reaching level 8. The entire system was successfully written out and executed, but unfortunately came with its own issues, like the realization of an oversight that, almost derailed the entire project. As you do. Anyway, before we get into today's session, remember to leave a like if you enjoy the video and subscribe if you're new to the channel. Turn on notifications to keep up to date with the many projects going on, including this mashup, which is taking us to a different place today. But first, let's talk fixes. Level up descriptions have been constrained to the confines of their little menu boxes. The walnut is now actually part of the passive class. Now this had no mechanical effect on our game, thankfully, but it did end up taking up a slot in the wrong plant list. Next, cherry bombs now produce a number of bombs based on their amount of value. Before this change, the cherry bomb would only create one bomb per cycle, despite the upgrade allowing for more. And the final fix made this session was to the level up menu generation. A new array was created to keep track of plants that reach max level. This is so that once a plant has reached max level, especially if it evolves, it doesn't show up on the menu again. Now, additions this session were on the lighter side, but for good reason. The Plantern makes yet another return to the game as the garlic equivalent from Vampire Survivors. And so, based on a simple timer, the Plantern will now hurt all nearby enemies within its damage radius. Now, we most definitely could have re-implemented the damage cooldown again like the garlic from Vampire Survivors, but because our timers work on fixed intervals based on Plants vs. Zombies, the enemy's hurt cooldown in general means it's impossible for the Plantern to do more damage than it should per tick. Now, if you've seen last episode, you know I had to take a break from working on this project to reassess things. This meant a lot of time was spent thinking about the mechanics, and I think it's safe to say that we've hit a fork in the road. Mechanically speaking, we have achieved just about as much as we can with this concept. We can add plants to both the world and to an inventory system. Those plants act accordingly, mostly based on either Plants vs. Zombies or Vampire Survivors mechanics. Those plants can be upgraded to do more damage or affect a larger area and so on. They can even evolve. The system is also flexible that we could, in theory, have pea shooters evolve into cattails if we wanted. And those plants can then interact with our enemies and defend our player by either destroying the vampiric horde or have the player die trying. Everything we need to make this mashup a reality now exists. Now, you look at the footage and you may think to yourself, no, you're insane, this is far from a finished product. And you'd be right. All that's missing is the content and visuals. But this is where things get dicey and why I say we've come to a fork in the road. We can spend hours upon hours deciding what perks plants should get per level. We can implement the different enemy types and even the bosses. We can continue to add those remaining plants back into the project. But at the end of the day, it'd just be repeating the process of adding a plant and adding the level up perks. I mean, just imagine today's coverage of the Plantern repeated for however many plants are left on the PvZ roster. And sadly, even the enemies wouldn't change up the formula too much. Another concern is copyright. As with my Phasmophobia cross-minute mashup, there comes a point where the fear of copyright infringement outweighs the want to work on a project. You know, flying too close to the sun. That is to say that continuing the project would mean having to strip the project of all its visual infringements and reintroducing the project under its own original concept. So instead of Plants vs. Vampires, it's, fish vs. aliens. Which leads me to one final point. We're kind of already doing that in another project. Recently, I brought back the original Plants vs. Vampires concept under its own unique theme and concept. It takes what we started here and expands on it without the restrictions of adhering to the existing properties. And the ambitions for the project are already set to go places, far further than we could in this project. So, to recap, we've technically achieved our goal mechanically. All that's left is to fill it with content. But that content could get the project cancelled for copyright infringement. So we'll have to change the concept to make it original, which is kind of what we're already doing in another project. So it's hard to decide where we go from here. While not opposed to the continuation of this mashup idea, the only way forward is to drop what I'm sure many of you follow this project for. And since one of these projects is owned by EA, it's really not worth the risk. And so with all that said, I leave it up to you. Do we continue the project under its own banner, or do we sunset it and appreciate the memories and lessons learned? The reality is we accomplished what we set out to do. Whether it would work long term or not is kinda up for debate, even if we do continue. So if you want to see this project continue, even possibly lead to an actual playable finale, then it's important that you let me know in the comments. And speaking of playable, if you would like to play a few other games that have been featured on the channel, or get early access to these weekly game dev videos, subscribe to my Patreon. But with that said, brings us to the end of today's Dev Diary, so thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.